All right, so we've come to part 4, talking about your findings, introduction, conclusions, and next steps. And I will explain why we're talking about the introduction now. So in terms of your findings section, I just told each group kind of a little bit more in depth about your findings for your methods section, for your particular method. The reason this page range is so short is because quantitative finding sections are going to be shorter because your tables are in the appendix. For qualitative folks, you're including your quotes in the finding section, which really makes them longer. And quantitative folks are not. So you're talking about the patterns that your data reveal and what you found here. And you need to go beyond description. You need to go beyond reporting the numbers, go beyond reporting the quotes from your participants and say what's going on here, integrate what you found with previous findings, and ultimately answer your research question. So make sure you're doing that in your findings section. Now we come back to the introduction. So keep in mind, the introduction and really the paper as a whole should not include your opinions, feelings, personal experiences, or random thoughts. So if you come across those when you're rereading, editing your paper, just delete them. But it should introduce the topic and how it's related to family. So you got to make that connection. You'll see that is one of the points in the rubric. How is this related to family? You should introduce any important terms that will be used in the paper. This doesn't apply to everyone, but if you've got more of a unique term or idea, you need to talk about that here. And then try to start broad and get specific in terms of the introduction, in terms of talking about the broader topic and then your specific topic in question. You should state the research question near the end of the introduction. I even like to italicize my research question so it really stands out. And then your introduction section finishes with what we call a roadmap. So this is not a mystery novel. It's not like, ooh, you have to wait to the end of the paper to find out, what my findings. Actually, no, we just tell everybody up front because we want them to keep reading. So tell the reader where you're going, what they're going to learn. So in the next section, I review my literature on this topic, then I move on to the methods and the findings. Overall, I found this, and then I'll conclude the paper. So this is why I recommend writing your introduction section last, because you don't know what you're going to find until you've found it. And so you really can't introduce the topic in a really good way until you know how it ends. All right, and then your conclusion is going to be about 1.5 to 3 pages. It should start by restating your major findings. I know you just talked about them right before this section, but this is how we do conclusions. You'll notice that the authors of the articles that we read have done this. We need to remind people of what we found. And then your conclusion has 4 major paragraphs or ideas. It doesn't have to be limited to 4 paragraphs, but kind of like 4 things that it does. First, you want to talk about how your studies, how your findings relate to the studies described in your introduction or literature review, and cite them appropriately. You might have already done this in your findings. If you did that in your findings, you don't need to do it again here. But this is making those connections. How does this all tie in? Then you want to discuss, so I guess my first point here was the first thing conclusions do. Then the second thing, and now the third thing. So third, discuss which theoretical approach, so go back to your textbook and go back to that theory chapter, and this is the why. Why are you finding the findings that you're finding? What theory does this relate to? And then finally, discuss the implications of your research. What do your findings suggest about our understanding of this topic as they pertain to families? What research questions remain? Does your research have any policy implications? You don't need to say, my research does not have policy implications, but if it does, you should include it here. All right, so we're finishing up with the next steps of the paper. So now that you've gone through this video workshop, what do you do? So write your paper. Submit a full rough draft with every section of the paper by Sunday, May 10th at 11:55 p.m. Put it all together as best as you can so that I can give you as much feedback as possible so that you can turn in the the final draft to the best of your abilities. I'm going to be reviewing papers, starting that Monday morning and reviewing them as quickly as possible. Then revise your paper and submit your final draft by Wednesday, May 20th. That is the final deadline. I need to have all work in by then so I can spend the next week and a half grading before grades are due. So if you have questions, let me know. Just work little at a time, piece by piece. Just keep going and let me know as you have questions.